And I welcome you all on behalf of Project ECO and ILBS. And we are happy to see such a huge crowd for the session today. So we have rolled out a new program this year, and we'll be doing training in module wise basis. I hope all of you have already gone through the pre-test. So first session today will be delivered by Dr. Vinod Arora. He's assistant professor in Department of Hepatology. His topic of discussion today will be approach to abnormal LFTs. Guys, please be attentive and ask as many questions as you can ask after the session. That is the aim of doing it. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Oh, good afternoon. I'll be covering basically an approach to an abnormal liver function test. They are basically the routine tests that are done every day, day in, day out, the routine LFT, and the ASTs, ALTs, and OT, PT, whatever you say, and SAP, GGT, and the bilirubin. So the outline will be the common liver test, the normal value of the liver test, and the approach to the various pattern of the LFTs. So common liver biochemical and function test includes the liver enzymes, which basically indicates a damage to the hepatocytes and leading to the elevation of the liver enzyme, which can be in form of hepatocyte injury, hepatocellular damage, or the cholestatic pattern. Hepatocellular usually AST, ALTs, and that is aspartate transaminase and alanine transaminase, cholestasis, alkaline phosphatase, and gamma glutamyl transaminase, transpeptidase. And the transporter, that is ICG and bilirubin, and the hepatic function synthetic function test, that is serum albumin, prothrombin, and the INR. So coming on to the liver enzyme, the test that indicates hepatocyte injury, that is the aminotransferases. They are two aspartate and alanine transaminases. They basically catalyze the transfer of the amino group to form the pyruvate and oxaloacetate respectively. AST is basically present in both cytoplasm and the mitochondria, and ALT is predominantly a cytosolic enzyme. Half-life of the AST and ALT of the AST cytosol and the mitochondria varies. Of the cytosol, it is 17 hours, and in the mitochondria is basically 87 hours. For the ALT, it is 47 hours, and AST is usually non-specific and can be seen in the damage to the liver, cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle, kidneys, brain, pancreas, lung, leukocyte, and RBCs. And ALT is present in low concentration in other tissues. So basically distinguishing between the pattern of rise, that is between the AST ALT, can help in characterization of the liver injury. AST is specifically in AST, the toxins such as alcohol, which cause predominantly mitochondrial damage, will cause predominant elevation of AST as compared to ALT. In viral hepatitis or primarily in the hepatocyte damage, you'll see elevation of ALT more as compared to AST. However, in toxins such as alcohol or in disease such as Wilson's disease, the elevation of AST is greater than ALT, which usually points towards a specific diagnosis. They basically indicates the damage to the mitochondria initially, followed by the cytoplasm. So AST-ALT elevation can help in initially determining the cause of liver damage. So the factor which affects the AST-ALT, besides the liver injury, the time of the day, the ALT is usually, there is variation of 45% in ALT during the day. Highest level of ALT is usually noted during the afternoon and lowest in the night. Day to day, there is variation, and 5 to 10% or 10 to 20% AST-ALT respectively, variation from day to next day. And the race also affects the level of AST and ALT. 15% higher level of AST-ALT is noted in African Americans. Body mass index, basically with increase in the higher by BMI, 40% to 50% elevation is noted in ALT and AST. Meals usually do not affect exercises cause increase in AST level, and ALT level usually gets down with the in the patient, in the person who usually exercise. And storage also influence the levels of AST, ALT, and hemolysis, hemolytic injury, and muscle injury usually cause predominantly increase in the AST as compared to the ALT. The other liver enzymes which usually reflect cholestasis are alkaline phosphatase. It basically catalyzes the transfer of the organic phosphate ester. That is, it is, and the enzymes is usually bound to the hepatic canicular membrane. The elevation is usually due to the induction of the enzyme synthesis rather than the inability of the liver to secrete into the bile. And usually 1 to 2 X rise upper limit of the normal is usually hepatocellular, and more than 3 time elevation is usually pointing towards the obstruction of the cholestatic pattern. The other non-liver causes of elevation can be bone disease, can be seen in the renal failure, renal cancer, pregnancy, sepsis, lymphomas, hypothyroidism, hypophosphatemia, diabetes, then can be seen in bone fractures, osteitis deformans, intra-abdominal infection, pernicious anemia, or zinc deficiency. Then GGT, that is gamma glutamyl transpeptidase, it basically catalyzes the transfer of the gamma glutamyl group, and higher concentration is noted in the bile duct epithelial cells. And it is basically the combination of the alkaline phosphatase and the gamma glutamyl transpeptidase that points toward the liver source of the elevation, rather than excluding the alkaline, other sources of alkaline phosphatase elevation. Basically, alkaline phosphatase is not specific. It can be seen increase in intestine, can be seen elevation can be seen in bony disease, can be seen in pregnancy. Gamma GGT is basically is sensitive but not specific for the cholestatic injury. The causes of elevation of GGT is basically liver disease, cholestatic liver disease, then can be seen in alcohol, can be seen post-radiotherapy, can be seen secondary to the drug that are usually inducible to GGT. Commonly is phenobarbital, then phenytoin, acetaminophen can also cause OCPs, and anticox can also cause elevation in GGTs. This basically shows the metabolism of the bilirubin, and bilirubin is basically formed from the heme, which is a product of degradation of the hemoglobin, and it's basically leads to the formation of the bilirubin. When the bilirubin is bound to the albumin, and it's and then it's transferred to the liver, and in the liver it is taken up by the hepatocyte, and albumin is released, and then it undergoes via UGT1 into glucuronidation, and leading to the excretion from the liver into the intestine, which then undergoes enterohepatic circulation in the terminal ileum, and via that portal circulation, it is also is secreted back into the liver, and it forms the gut-liver axis. And then some portion is also excreted by the kidneys, and the some portion is excreted as in the stools as stercobilin. So coming on to the causes of jaundice, there can be prehepatic, posthepatic. Prehepatic is usually secondary to the ineffective erythropoiesis or the hemolysis. Posthepatic is usually due to the obstructive, which can be secondary to the gallstones, can be secondary to strictures, can be secondary to any carcinoma which of the pancreaticobiliary tree, secondary to the cholangitis, which is obviously secondary to the obstruction of the pancreaticobiliary tree. Then coming on to the hepatic can be basically secondary to the drugs which cause hepatocellular damage. Then can be secondary to viral hepatitis, can be drug induced, can be autoimmune, can secondary to Gilbert syndrome or the Crigler-Nazar. Then can be due to the impaired excretion, secondary to drug which cause impaired the excretion of the bilirubin, such as rifampicin, Dubin-Johnson syndrome, and the intrahepatic obstruction can be seen in infiltrative liver disorders, tumors, and the sepsis. So what is the normal value of LFTs? Albumin is basically 3.3 to 5. Usually, alkaline phosphatase is in males is usually 45 to 115. Females is usually 30 to 100. Alkaline ALT is basically 10 to 55. Females is 7 to 30. Aspartate aminotransferase is basically 10 to 40 and 9 to 32 in male and female respectively. Bilirubin total is 0 to 1 and bilirubin direct is 0 to 0.4. GGT is usually 8 to 61 and females it is 5 to 36 and prothrombin time is usually normal value is 11 to 13.7 seconds, and the reference range may vary from lab to lab. And coming on to the determinants of the liver enzymes elevation, or the normal values, average ALT increases from childhood to 40 years of age, and greater increase is seen in the males as compared to the females. And the ALT levels are usually higher by 30% in males 40 years of age than in males 25 years of age. After 40 years of age, the ALT level decline, more pronounced decline is seen in the male as compared to the females. If a patient is having normal ALT, does it exclude liver disease? Usually no. And this was a study published in Gastroenterology, and it was basically shows that despite the normal ALT level, a patient had a higher DNA level, and this basically shows that despite the normal, the DNA load could be high, and the annual spontaneous rate of spontaneous a flare despite having normal ALT is 4.3%, and the cumulative probability of ALT flare in 5 year and 10 years are 10 to 47%. This basically shows despite having normal ALT levels, the presence of histological activity index greater than 3 and fibrosis can be seen in up to 38% of the patient with normal ALT value in hepatitis B. Can have F2 fibrosis in 25% of the patient, and F3, F4 can be seen in up to 14% of the patient. So this brings us to FibroScan, which can help in the non-invasive assessment of the liver stiffness. It is painless, rapid, and bedside outpatient test, and usually gives immediate result, and the value ranges from 3 to 75 kilopascals. And the training program is usually very short, and a patient can learn FibroScan in 100 examination. This basically shows the normal FibroScan. This basically indicates the stiffness of the liver, and this basically measures the intraquartile range, which is usually it is not coming up, and this basically the median is taken and the stiffness is measured. Just not to. This basically shows a normal gradient on the FibroScan. The normal is usually with 3 to 5.5 is usually no mild fibrosis. Up to 7, it is usually mild fibrosis. Beyond 7, it is significant usually F2 beyond F2 fibrosis. And 7 to 9 is significant fibrosis, and beyond usually 13, it is severe fibrosis. And in some diseases beyond 17, it is usually classified as cirrhosis. So basically, this shows the gradient of the ALT value and the liver stiffness perspective. And as there is an elevation of the ALT, there is an increase in the liver stiffness, which is noted. And as compared to the ALT, which is less than with a lower mean liver stiffness measurement, as with a LSM of usually around 3 to 4 or 3 to 4 at the mean of 4.7 with the ALT less than upper limit of the normal. However, with the elevation of the ALT, there can be increase in the liver stiffness, which is noted. ALT also correlates with the liver injury. It also correlates with the risk of the heart disease. So this basically shows with the elevation of the ALT, there's increased risk of the mortality in patient with liver disease. As compared to the patient who have a normal ALT level. So despite having with the elevation of the ALT, the increased they noted basically increased cardiovascular mortality also. Similarly, in the females also, they noted increase with the increase in the ALT level. There's an increased risk of mortality from the liver and the cardiovascular. Recently there have been updated limit for determining the normal ALT value, and the study was done done in Italy, and they basically updated the healthy ALT range determined from the low risk individual with the normal upper limit of the ALT in males is at 30 and in females is 19. Basically fatty liver, high ALT, and cardiovascular disease, I have already told that they correlate with the endothelial dysfunction, hypertension, and higher risk of cardiovascular mortality. The 14-year mortality in patients who have a high ALT is usually doubled, and there's a higher risk of coronary heart disease, and it correlates with the endothelial dysfunction. And it is basically dilemma that the liver fat precedes the heart disease, and the liver fatty liver usually due to the imbalance between the adiponectin and the lectin level, there's an increase in the lectin level, and there's a decrease in the adiponectin, and it predisposes for the high deposition of insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, and increased endothelial damage, and increased deposition of the fat in and around the heart muscle, and predisposing to the increased cardiovascular mortality. So coming on to the approach or to the LFTs can be acute or chronic. More than 6 months is usually defined as cirrhosis, and the pattern of the LFT abnormalities, that is whether it is isolated increase in the bilirubin, whether it is a hepatocellular form of jaundice or cholestatic, or it is symptomatic or asymptomatic. So if the patient is asymptomatic and presents with abnormal liver test, first step is to repeat the test to confirm the elevation, and make sure the patient is not taking any alternative medication, any drug, any use of alcohol, or any change in the food habits in the recent past. The fast food can cause elevation, rapid and profound in serum ALT levels. Increase in calorie intake by 2.5 times, increase in body weight by around 5 to 15%, leads to increase in the hepatic triglyceride level, and can lead to elevation in the ALT level. So the clinical elevation medical history should include all the questions regarding recent change in dietary habit, regarding recent alcohol or any recent binge, or excessive intake that has occurred. So the purpose of taking history is basically to rule out for any risk factor for a viral hepatitis, looking for any drug or any toxins, and the symptoms of any other disorder that can be multisystemic and involving the liver, or ruling out any predisposing underlying condition, which can be in form of heart disease leading to congestive hepatopathy, underlying diabetes and obesity predisposing to fatty liver disease, and underlying inflammatory bowel disease predisposing to formation of the gallstones and the primary sclerosing cholangitis, and presence of chest disorders such as alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and ruling out any malabsorption to look for any presence of celiac disease, and hypothyroidism predisposing to fatty liver disease. So the physical examination usually suggest and may point towards the underlying cause of the liver disease. In cirrhosis, we should look for the wasting of the proximal muscle, the wasting of the interossei, and the wasting of the temporal and the proximal muscle. Then the looking for the signs of the or the stigmata of the liver disease, which can be a form of the spider nevi, palmar edema, gynecomastia, caput medusae, presence of ascites, signs of hepatic encephalopathy. Then coming on to the local examination, whether it is a large liver disease, whether it is small liver disease. The liver is basically divided in large liver disease or small liver disease. The presence of the hepatojugular reflux, presence of local tenderness, the nodular liver, whether it is the nodules are hard, they can point towards specific diagnosis. Whether the liver is pulsatile, grossly enlarged liver, which is hard, nodular, points towards malignancy, and large tender liver can point toward the congestive hepatopathy, which can be secondary to the right side heart failure. Budd-Chiari syndrome can be secondary to the alcoholic hepatitis. Presence of spleen usually indicates the presence, large spleen indicates the presence of portal hypertension. Presence of ascites, that is shifting dullness, indicates basically the presence of portal hypertension or the malignancies. Then the other signs which are specific to some diseases such as alcoholic cirrhosis, that can be Doppler contracture, enlargement of the parotid glands or the atrophy of the testicles. Then signs of extrahepatic signs of malignancy, that can be enlargement of the left supraclavicular node, presence of the periumbilical nodule, such as system Marie-Joseph nodule, and then the presence of increased jugular venous pressure can indicate towards the hepatic congestion. Presence of neurological signs and symptoms can correlate with Wilson's disease. So the pattern of LFT elevation needs to be seen, whether it is a hepatocellular, whether it is cholestatic, or in isolated increase in the bilirubin level. Hepatocellular pattern is usually AST-ALT that is greater than the alkaline phosphatase, with a predominant increase in the bilirubin and decrease in the synthetic function of the liver, which is usually denoted by the INR and the albumin level. Cholestatic pattern is basically elevation in the alkaline phosphatase, plus can be elevation of the bilirubin. The synthetic function is usually not impaired in the cholestatic pattern unless and until it is an intrahepatic cholestasis. In extrahepatic cholestasis, it is usually preserved. Isolated bilirubin increase can be usually secondary to seen in the enzyme defects. So the hemolysis is characterized by the normal AST-ALT level and alkaline phosphatase level, and with an increase in the bilirubin. And then the bilirubin should be noted whether it is a direct fraction of the bilirubin that has increased or the indirect fraction of the bilirubin that has increased. So distinguishing between the cholestatic and the hepatocellular value of the drug-induced liver injury is basically determined by the R value, which basically is a ratio of the ALT by ALP, and ALT activity is determined by the ALT of the patient divided by the ALT upper limit of the normal, while ALP activity is determined by the ALP of the patient by the ALP of the upper limit of the, and it basically is a ratio between the ALT and the alkaline phosphatase activity, which determines the R ratio. More than R of 5 is usually indicative of the hepatocellular damage. Cholestatic pattern usually causes predominantly increase in the alkaline phosphatase, and R is usually less than 2, and a mixed pattern is basically between 2 to 5. So coming on to the different diseases which can cause elevation of the AST-ALT, alcohol fatty liver disease usually cause less than 8-time elevation of the AST and less than 5-time elevation of the ALT, and AST is usually greater than ALT. Non-alcoholic fatty liver usually cause a decrease less than 4-time increase in the AST and ALT. Viral hepatitis can be seen up to 25% increase in upper limit of the normal of AST and ALT, and ischemic hepatitis can cause both elevation of AST and ALT. AST is usually more elevated as compared to the ALT, and LDH is also markedly elevated. Hepatitis B and C usually in chronic hepatitis, and there's no, and the low DNA usually cause less than 2 times of upper limit of the normal, and with the reactivation of hepatitis B or underlying super infection with hepatitis D or co-infection with hepatitis B, or reactivation can cause elevation of ALT by up to 10 times. So AST-ALT ratio is usually seen in less than 1 is usually seen in majority of the liver disease, and greater than 4 is seen in chronic hepatitis, fulminant hepatitis. Greater than 2 is AST-ALT is usually seen, can be seen in Wilson's, acute Wilson's. Then cirrhosis causes initially patient usually have ALT greater than AST. However, as the disease progresses to cirrhosis, there is elevation of AST greater than ALT, and AST-ALT ratio is usually greater than 2. Then a mild ischemia, drug, toxin, alcohol can cause AST-ALT elevation of more than 2. So the diseases which can lead to marked elevation of the transaminases can be medication, then secondary to the viral hepatitis, which can be typical, that is A, B, D, A, B, and E, then herpes virus and varicella, Epstein, cytomegalo, they usually cause anicteric hepatitis and leading to elevation the aminotransferases. Then the reactivation of the hepatitis B, autoimmune hepatitis, Wilson's disease, Budd-Chiari syndrome, then the veno-occlusive disease can cause elevation of the aminotransferases. The HELLP syndrome, that is hemolysis, elevated liver enzyme, low platelet seen in pregnancy, fatty liver of pregnancy, then the infiltrative liver, which can be secondary to the infiltration by the multiple malignancies, lymphoma, myeloma, then the heat stroke and the muscle disorder can cause elevation of the ASTs and ALT. So when the patient presents with markedly elevated aminotransferases, then the initial part is to look for the history, then the physical examination, initial will be to look for the serology of the acute hepatitis, usually IgM, HAV, IgM, HEV, hepatitis B, IgM anti-core. Anti-HCV usually doesn't cause acute hepatitis. Very rare with hepatitis C to have a marked elevation in transaminases. And then if the initial test is negative, then go for the autoimmune markers, which are usually anti-nuclear, anti-smooth muscle, anti-liver kidney microsome, and the serum immunoglobulin G level. The patient is having suspicion of Wilson disease, then look for ceruloplasmin and 24-hour urinary copper. And the patient is having features of metabolic liver disease, or if the suspicion is of for muscle disease, then look for the serum aldolase level and the creatinine kinase level. If the patient is still having persistent elevation in transaminases, rule out any alternative medication, then the liver biopsy is usually required to give an idea why the patient is having marked elevation, whether it is due to some seronegative hepatitis or a seronegative autoimmune hepatitis, which can cause transient elevation in the aminotransferases. Mild to moderate can be seen secondary to the drugs, can be seen in alcoholic liver disease, can be seen in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, in autoimmune and the Wilson's and the ductopenic syndromes. Infiltration can also lead to mild to moderate elevation in the transaminases, then thyroid and the celiac, and the macro AST, that is the formation of the complex between the AST and the immunoglobulin and the hemochromatosis. The workup is usually to look for serology, that is hepatitis B, C, look for check for ultrasound, looking for any changes in the fatty liver disease, look for the markers of autoimmune hepatitis, rule out Wilson's, look for the thyroid and the celiac disease. Then the specific for for each can be hemochromatosis, look for serum transferrin saturation and alpha-1 antitrypsin levels, then looking for adrenal insufficiency, muscle disorders in the historically for exercise intolerance, myalgias, muscle weakness, and in the clinical, in the biochemical creatinine kinase and aldolase level. Basically, step 2, if the patient is having persistently elevated AST/ALT, usually a liver biopsy we usually perform here before starting the treatment after the DNA and the RNA report. Then the elevated alkaline phosphatase cholestasis is usually due to the impaired bile flow or formation, and can be classified as intrahepatic or extrahepatic. Intrahepatic is usually extrahepatic, and intrahepatic can be distinguished on the basis of presence of palpable lump, palpable gallbladder. Features of cholangitis are usually seen in extrahepatic rather than in intrahepatic, and the pain, fever, lump usually point towards the extrahepatic cause of cholestasis rather than the intrahepatic. In cholestasis, ALP levels are usually more than 4 times of upper limit of the normal, and however, there is no level of ALP which distinguishes between the intrahepatic and the extrahepatic cholestasis. Lesser degrees are usually non-specific, can be seen in the hepatocellular cause of jaundice, that is viral hepatitis, infiltrative liver disease, or the congestive hepatopathy. And confirming that the alkaline phosphatase is of hepatic origin, then we need to also check for the gamma glutamyl transpeptidase level. It's usually parallel in elevation with the alkaline phosphatase, which points toward the liver disorder. And as I've already told before, that the non-specific elevation can also be seen in the bony disorder can be secreted from the intestine, or can be seen in the pregnant female, the isolated elevation of the alkaline phosphatase. So basically, to investigate cholestasis, patient presenting with raised alkaline phosphatase level, you need to check for gamma glutamyl transfer. If the patient is having alcohol or toxin, advised to stop alcohol and toxin, then follow up with the alkaline phosphatase level, and then advice for weight loss, look for any hepatocellular cause of the elevation, and recheck LFT after some time. If the patient is having persistently elevated alkaline phosphatase, look for signs of cholangitis, look for an ultrasound examination, look for presence of dilatation of the bile ducts, and consider ERCPs or MRCP or other imaging to investigate the cause. If the patient is having non-dilated bile ducts, then it usually points towards the intrahepatic cholestasis, which can be secondary to the some drugs, primary biliary cholangitis. And this basically points towards the intrahepatic cholestasis, and this can be hepatocellular or cholangiocellular. Hepatocellular usually through the cholestatic variety of viral hepatitis, commonly seen in hepatitis E, and the genetic disorder, that is benign recurrent intrahepatic cholestasis, progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis, and then the deficiencies of the transporters, that is ABCB4, then the intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, then secondary to protoporphyrias, infiltration of the liver, secondary to some malignancies, can cause elevation of the alkaline phosphatase. Then the benign infiltrative, such as amyloidosis, sarcoid, or tuberculosis, and other granulomatous diseases such as histoplasmosis, can cause elevation of the alkaline phosphatase. And then paraneoplastic syndromes such as Hodgkin's, then renal carcinoma, sepsis can cause intrahepatic cholestasis. Mild elevation can be seen in the alcoholic or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. This patient is on prolonged TPN, secondary to ductal plate formation, usually presents with a large liver, and the features of portal hypertension can point towards a congenital hepatic fibrosis. Nodular regenerative hyperplasia secondary to vascular disorder can be Budd-Chiari, veno-occlusive, or congestive hepatopathy. And the cholangio commonly we see is basically primary biliary cirrhosis, primary sclerosing cholangitis, then IgG4 related cholangitis, then the ductopenic syndromes, which can usually commonly seen due to the drugs, cystic fibrosis, then ductal plate malformation, hematomas, Caroli's, drug-induced cholangiopathies, GVHTs, secondary sclerosing cholangitis, which can be seen due to the ischemic changes, then in vasculitis can be seen secondary to the HIV and AIDS. Isolated elevation of the bilirubin level is usually commonly seen as Gilbert syndrome, is the unconjugated variant, and the other is conjugated, which is the increase in the direct bilirubin levels. So basically, the enzymes ratio has additional support for the differential diagnosis of the elevation of the bilirubin. Elevated LDH levels as compared to the AST usually points over the hemolysis in hepatocellular jaundice. It is the LDH to SGOT level are usually less than 12, and PT level versus the glutamyl dehydrogenase level, obstructive jaundice, it will be less than 10, and if it is hepatocellular, then it is greater than 10. To work up for the isolated elevation of the will require a liver biopsy. In the viral markers, basically ruling in the normal liver enzymes and the normal bile salt level. If the bilirubin is basically predominantly indirect, look for any vitamin B12 deficiencies, hemolytic anemia, Tata box homozygosity to look for Gilbert syndrome. Look for any drugs which can cause hemolysis and precipitate indirect elevation of the bilirubin. And if the patient is having largely direct component, look for Dubin-Johnson and the Rotar syndrome. If the patient presents with indirect elevation of the bilirubin, and the tests are usually test for Gilbert is positive, then there's nothing major which needs to be done, and patient needs to be counseled, and no further testing is required. Then the abnormal synthetic function tests can be secondary to the hepatocellular injury and the cholestasis. Usually albumin is an acute phase, negative acute phase reactant, and low albumin can be seen in a chronic process of severe acute injury. Chronic process such as cirrhosis or hepatocellular carcinoma lead to low albumin level, and normal albumin level usually points towards acute process such as a viral hepatitis. However, albumin being a negative acute phase reactant can be low in the acute illnesses also. And then the prolonged prothrombin time usually indicates towards both the obstructive and the hepatocellular damage, and reversibility by vitamin K can be help in distinguishing between the hepatocellular and the obstructive variant. The obstructive variant of the increased INR will usually resolve with vitamin K. However, the hepatocellular variant is not reversible by giving vitamin K. So usually in cirrhosis or any acute viral illness, which is predominantly hepatocellular, there's no point in giving vitamin K. It is the obstructive pattern in which vitamin K can have some role, is usually having role. And synthetic function is also determined by the serum albumin level. It depends upon the nutrition, the volume status, the integrity of the vascular endothelium, the catabolism, the hormone, and the loss in the urine and the stool. It is not specific for the liver disease and not for the acute liver disease usually. It is coded by chromosome 4, and basically in endothelium, endothelial reticulum, it is the proalbumin, and which is formed by the formed into albumin, which is 67 kilodalton protein with 609 amino acids, and less than 2 gram is synthesized in the liver, and majority of the albumin is released. And rate of daily albumin synthesis can increase up to 2 to 3 times to 12 to 25 gram a day, and half-life of albumin is usually 18 to 19 days, and increase due to the distribution of the volume of volume can be increased in cirrhosis. This basically shows the structure and the functions of the albumin. It basically helps in solubilizing the toxins, bilirubin, help in the transport of multiple drugs in the metabolism, act as a antioxidant. There are multiple studies now coming on the immunomodulatory role of the albumin, and Usually it is a cysteine 34 residue of the albumin, which is predominantly playing part in the solubilization, transport, and the metabolism. And usually N-terminal part is usually associated with the endothelial stabilization, then the modulation of the immune system, maintaining capillary permeability and the hemostasis. Then the C-terminal is usually associated with the metabolism of the endogenous molecule such as bilirubin, biliary salts, fatty acids, and the exogenous molecule, that is the other toxins, the drugs such as NSAIDs and warfarin antibiotics, and the heavy metals. This basically summarizes the role of albumin and the role in cirrhosis. Basically, as I've told, it is synthesized by albumin on chromosome 4, and usually secretion is around 13 to 25 gram per day. And the binding, it binds multiple fatty acid, drugs, sugar, metal, bilirubin, and stimulates the immune modulation, stimulates the endothelial gene, reduces and plays a role in immune modulation by decreasing the interleukins and the tumor necrosis factor. And the role of albumin can be is in ascites, then spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, hepatorenal syndromes, and non colloidal function has seen improvement in the muscle cramp, which are usually associated with the in cirrhotic patient, anti-inflammatory, and pre-surgically or pre-intervention, such as TACE or any other ablative procedure or resection, hepatic resection for any hepatocellular carcinoma. Usually maintaining albumin in the range of 3.2 to 3.5 usually has a good outcome, and can be used as source in albumin dialysis, Prometheus, or Mars. Thank you.
So we can take the questions now. The query, please raise your hand. So all those who have queries to ask, please raise your hands. So no query. We move to the case discussion. Okay, so we are moving to the case discussion. I would request the presenter to please come ahead and present the case. We are just putting it on the display. So Dr. Chandni will be presenting her case. MRMC ko.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Myself, Dr. Chandni S. Prasad from Gulbarga. We have a male patient by 43 years old from Gulbarga. His occupation is private business. His HOPA is yellowish discoloration of sclera since 6 months, which is progressive in nature. Pain abdomen since 2 months, moderate in severity, which is associated with distension of abdomen, insidious in onset and gradually progressive, and also bleeding per rectum since a week. He is a known case of hypertension and type 2 diabetes mellitus since 3 years, but he is not on any regular medication. The patient has never been a drug abuser, or he has not received any clotting factor recipients before 1987. Blood transfusion or solid organ transport before July 1992, no. He doesn't have any history of surgery, no history of needle stick injury in the healthcare setting. The patient has takes about 7.5 hours of alcohol. The last alcohol intake was 2 months back. The patient takes alcohol all the days in a week, drink of 5 to 6 per day. The patient is not currently involved in counseling or support group. Patient doesn't have any other substance abuse. No history of coronary artery disease. Patient is a known case of diabetes mellitus and hypertension. Not a known case of CVA or PVD or hyperlipidemia. No hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, or any autoimmune diseases. There's no chronic renal insufficiency, no asthma, not a known seizure disorder, no HIV, HCV or HPSAG, no solid organ transplant. There is no psychiatric history. The patient is currently on IV antibiotics and tab midodrine 2.5 mg TID. Tab Trentol 400 mg BD, tab Newsam 400 mg BD, and tab Udiliv 300 mg BD.
Okay.
The patient has icterus and pallor, grade 3 ascites and mild splenomegaly, bilateral pitting type of edema. There's loss of axillary and body hair. Has vitals, blood pressure is 120 by 70 mmHg and pulse rate of 96 beats per minute. Investigation wise, his total HP is 8.4 and total counts of 11,500. Platelets 1,20,000. Total bilirubin of 13.6, direct bilirubin 6.8 and indirect bilirubin 6.8. Total protein is 5.6 and albumin is 2.6. AST is 83, ALP 32 and ALT 36 and GGT 52. Prothrombin time of 21.3 and INR 1.6. Urea 80 and creatinine 2.2. His latest creatinine is 4.4. Negative for HCV RNA, negative for HPSAG. AFP 7.9 nanogram per ml. Electrolytes are within normal range. Ascitic fluid analysis shows AD of 22.5, total count of 2,150, which are 80% neutrophils, sugar of 132 mg%, albumin is 0.52 gram%, negative for gram stain. His culture sensitivity report is still awaited.
Okay.
Upper GI endoscope, USG abdomen shows chronic parenchymal liver disease with portal hypertension features, massive ascites, and there's mild increased echo texture of bilateral kidneys. In upper GI endoscopy, there is grade 1 esophageal varices, mild portal hypertensive gastropathy. Other investigations are normal.
Okay. What specific you want to know about this patient? Basically, it's a case of cirrhosis, alcohol use disorder with the last intake of alcohol around 6 months back, and has currently decompensated in form of jaundice, ascites, and current issue is he's having SBP and worsening kidney injury.
HR, yes, sir.
Any specific need to manage the kidneys and the infection? And I think rather than giving midodrine, terlipressin would be a better choice for managing the kidneys, whether he's oliguric, anuric, or he's producing urine.
Sir, his urine output is very low, around 300 to 100 ml.
You may give him, and what is his mean arterial pressure?
100, 80, 85.
Okay. Okay, mean arterial pressure is around 85. And X-ray is fine. X-ray is
chest
okay.
X-ray is fine. Yes, sir. Chest X-ray is fine.
Okay. You're giving him albumin. He's basically having a current issue, as I've understood, he's having SBP and the kidneys are going bad. Creatinine has gone up to 4.4.
Yes, creatinine is 4.4, 2 days report. And
Okay.
patient has been transfused albumin also 2 days back.
Okay, you should give him a daily, usually we give daily albumin. The recommended dose is basically 1.5 gram per kg on day 1 and 1 gram per kg on day 3. But usually here we give roughly around 0.5 to 1 gram per kg per day, depending upon the tolerance of the patient. And you rather than using midodrine, you can use terlipressin if the cardiac conditions allow. And continuous infusion of terlipressin can be a better choice rather than giving a bolus. And high-end antibiotics because your patient is very sick. He's a child C cirrhotic, decompensated form of jaundice with a bilirubin of 13 and an INR of 1.75 with a high creatinine.
Sir, which diuretic is safe, sir, in this patient?
No diuretic.
Because
No diuretic. Irrespective, you need to initially take care of the kidneys, and he may require dialysis. No diuretic.
Sir, role of hepatic dialysis in this patient?
Oh, he's too sick for any kind of dialysis. He'll require a renal dialysis rather than a hepatic dialysis.
Sir, liver transplantation, what will be the outcome?
In presence of active infection, you need to take care of the infections in the kidneys. If in presence of infection, need to take clear of SBP for at least, and then need to wait for at least 14 days before the patient can be taken up for transplant. Second issue is kidneys. With a creatinine of 4.4, usually it is basically need to wait for the kidneys to get better. And whether it is a sepsis related AKI, whether it is a hepatorenal syndrome, you need to find out.
Sir, pentoxifylline role in CLD and HRS?
Usually nothing. Usually nothing. Need to give him albumin vasoconstrictors and high-end antibiotics, maybe carbapenems.
Sir, role of midodrine, sir?
Midodrine can be, midodrine has been shown inferior to terlipressin in a recent trial that was published in around 2017 in hepatology. It is inferior to terlipressin, especially as the grade of the liver disease progresses. The response to the vasoconstrictor is usually less, and terlipressin has been shown to superior to octreotide or midodrine in the management of HRS. You can use it as an outpatient, but in with a creatinine of 4.4 with a bilirubin of 13 and no cardiac issues, terlipressin is a better choice.
Sir, any indication for steroids?
No, he's having SBP, he's having active infections, active sepsis. So there's no role of any steroids.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.